What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from BucsGameday.com, and here are the Cannons. We have got a lot to discuss
We do.
this afternoon. We've got plenty. We've got Baker Mayfield with a massive, massive tweet last night, just out of nowhere, going after his former head coach, Kevin Stefanski. I'm looking at the tweet right now, almost nearing 20 million views and 150,000 likes. And we just heard from one of his former Browns teammates as well. He just tweeted out something. So we are going to do a deep dive into that whole situation. But first off, we'll begin with Mike McDaniel and the latest news last night, with him reportedly going to join the Chargers as their next offensive coordinator position. Yep. Also, too, the Bucs did make a hire and found their new special teams coach with Pittsburgh Steelers special teams coordinator Danny Smith. And then we've got a quick hitter, too, that we need to mention. The Falcons are trying to poach one of the Bucs offensive coaches as well, and that could heavily impact Mike Evans and his decision if he's going to intend on playing further with the Buccaneers. Does he want to go elsewhere, or does he go ahead and call it a career, Hall of Fame career, I must say. But like I said, River, when we opened up, we've got a lot to talk about. River Wells, our lead editor at BucsGameday.com. How we doing, man? We've had a busy last, I'd say, 72 hours in total.
Yeah, for sure. And it's only going to get busier once the Buccaneers start to ramp up the hiring process for offensive coordinator, which they're definitely doing. They took someone in for a second interview today, their first follow-up interview. So we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, definitely been real busy. Some words exchanged on social media, and now eyes are still turning to the Bucs OC job after their biggest candidate off the board.
Yeah, no, we've been keeping a close eye on it all throughout this. You know, once we saw that the Miami Dolphins were moving on from Mike McDaniel, there was some thought process immediately. Hey, you know what? This might be a position for the Bucs. You know, this might be somewhere where he wants to go. And of course, media thoughts were, okay, he's going to go and look at some head coaching positions, some of those open ones, because there are plenty. And it started to come out, some reports and some sources, all this kind of stuff going on, that he would be completely fine with going to a healthy spot at an offensive coordinator position, and then maybe eventually getting back into those head coaching ranks. So you were immediately like, okay, well, the Bucs certainly feel like one of those fits. There's a lot of talent there. You've got a strong quarterback there as well. And you've got, like I said, a wide receiver unit with Mike Evans, if you're able to retain him, and a lot of younger talent as well to work around with, including Bucky Irving at running back. Now, there was, of course, a lot of teams in this cycle, man. I think the Bucs just had some bad luck here with some big moves happening across the league. We also saw the Bills as well move on from McDermott. So there's a lot of other open opportunities than just coming to the Bucs and playing for Todd Bowles, which, you know, right now doesn't feel like a guy that is pretty safe going into 2026, I must say. And, you know, the Bucs did get an interview with Mike McDaniel in person, but as it broke last night, he is intending to go and coach for Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh. River, what are your first initial thoughts on this? As you know, some of the reports coming out that you know, the Bucs were trying very hard. It was them and also the Eagles involved on this with Mike McDaniel.
Well, it seemed like it was them and the Eagles, but that not only were the Bucs really aggressive on this front, McDaniel was very receptive to that and was in contact with him the whole time. Guys like Albert Breer and Jeff Darlington had the Bucs as the favorite to land him, and it seems like that was a very real possibility. And sometimes you sit down in that Cali sunshine and you start talking about Justin Herbert and things change, right? So hard to blame him from one end, because Justin Herbert, fantastic quarterback, so much potential. A lot of potential if you ask a lot of NFL fans. Definitely could do some really big things in the league if he can get things going over there. And then Omari and Hampton, you got some wide receiving talent there as well with Quentin Johnson. It's interesting because I think Jim Harbaugh is an offensive mind, right? He was a quarterback in the league. He's called plays before. So the autonomy with his offensive scheme was something that I was paying close attention to during this cycle. And I figured the Bucs would offer him the most autonomy out of any of these other jobs, definitely more than the Eagles, definitely more than the Lions, for instance. And then I thought more than the Chargers. But the lure of California, definitely a big thing for Mike McDaniel. His wife is from there, his family from there. He's from Colorado, which is close to California out west. So a little bit close to home. He's got some really good weapons and a great quarterback to play with there in Los Angeles at the Chargers. And Jim Harbaugh, real big motivator of a head coach. So I get it. I get the match. I get why the Bucs were really aggressive in pursuing him. Just couldn't work out.
I wonder if it comes down to specifically who's safer at head coach, Todd Bowles and Harbaugh, and not that like we were contemplating too. Hey, well, Mike McDaniel, if things don't go well for Todd Bowles, let's say in 2026, and hey, this could be a position for you. But here's the deal: that still could be a position for him in 2026.
Absolutely.
If things go well with Herbert and such, that can still be an opportunity there. It just won't be where you're elevating him from the Bucs offensive coordinator position up to the head coaching job for you, which, it was highly attractive. Like you said, he was receptive to it. I think those conversations went well between them. And I think, too, the excitement of playing for or coaching a guy like Baker Mayfield, I think a lot of coaches, like we've heard, there's a comment in here about Todd Monken. We'll speak on him in just a minute. But Todd Monken loves Baker Mayfield. He absolutely adores the guy. And you can add that in with, like we just talked about, the talent that you have in Tampa Bay. There's a lot to like about it, but there are still a lot of question marks. I still think, regarding, Todd Bowles and such, and just what the future would look like if you're coming in and, you're bringing your family down or wherever that might be.
Right.
It's something to think on, right, River?
For sure. And I think the allure that you could just step into that head coaching position is less potent than people seem to think it is. It's a lot of uncertainty there, and you could, step into that position, but what if there's another candidate that they like better? And then suddenly, if you were promised something and then another well-renowned head coach gets fired, like what if, I can be the Bucs head coach and you're promised that position, and then like the Packers like fire Matt LaFleur or something, like they wouldn't because they just extended him. But that sort of thing, like what happened with John Harbaugh, could happen to a number of established coaches, and then suddenly you would be out of that promise, wouldn't you? So the job security is definitely a big problem. I think a lot of people might know that, hey, Todd Bowles isn't going to be around here for very long, and if he gets fired, there's a good chance I'm going to get fired. So people are probably very wary of that, and they're probably calculating that with their internal sort of thought process of, do I want to go here and do this, and what's going to happen afterward? I understand it. I do.
Mm-hmm. So we know, of course, the interview with the Buccaneers, also too with the Detroit Lions.
He did.
He was in consideration for a handful of head coaching jobs. We actually heard the news earlier before it broke that he was, going to the Chargers, that he had turned down the head coaching opportunity and at least withdrew his name from that with the Cleveland Browns.
Right.
But, there was a lot of teams across, the Baltimore Ravens and Las Vegas Raiders. There was some interest, of course, from the Falcons before they went with Stefanski, and then the Titans as well. So, he was sought after as expected. We all knew this would be the case. We kind of even were talking about it going into the season because we were hearing things in the off season and heading into and some of those OTAs and specifically too in training camp where it was like just didn't feel like everything was aligned with McDaniel and his Dolphins team, and didn't start off hot and kind of started to show a little bit of life, but just wasn't the season that they wanted whatsoever. And now he's off to the Chargers, and the Bucs are now going to look at some other opportunities here, and they've got to find one. And I know I saw the comment on here, like I mentioned, Todd Monken, and here the former Ravens offensive coordinator. We've spoken on him quite a bit, but now with the other Harbaugh now taking that job with the Giants, you would expect to lean to where that is where Monken is headed to go join him as the offensive coordinator. But then you've got names like Zach Robinson.
You do.
The Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator is one to watch here closely. Brian Callahan, I believe, is on his second interview. Is that happening today, River?
I think it's just scheduled, but that is the first follow-up interview the Buccaneers will schedule with any OC candidate. So something to watch there.
Brian, what are your thoughts on Brian Callahan, the former Titans head coach? We actually got to see him up close and personal this year.
We did. Here's the thing about Brian Callahan. He comes from that Cincinnati Bengals offense, which I think has been largely fantastic no matter who is quarterback. Joe Burrow is fantastic and elite, but he doesn't really play football all that often. So they've had guys like Joe Flacco in there. They've had guys like Jake Browning in there. And the offense, I think, has remained extremely potent throughout that whole entire time.
Yeah.
So that's very valuable under Zach Taylor. Think about Callahan. Callahan did not call plays under Zach Taylor, right? He goes to Tennessee to become their head coach. He does call plays now. He goes 4-19. He gets fired. He gives up play calling right at the end of his tenure to try and save his job. It doesn't work. Usually with some of these coordinators and these people, these fired head coaches, you could be like, oh, well, they're probably just a better coordinator than they are a head coach, right?
Yeah.
We don't really know that about Brian Callahan, do we? Because he didn't call plays under Zach Taylor, right?
Yeah.
He goes to Tennessee. He calls plays as a head coach, and that doesn't go very well. So he was a first-time play caller essentially while being a head coach of Tennessee, and then they also interviewed Dan Pitcher, the quarterbacks coach who trained Burrow and then took over Callahan's job. I'd rather do that if you're going with a Bengals sort of hire, because he'd be a first-time play caller, just like Callahan would be with the Titans, but he doesn't have that bad history like Callahan does in Tennessee, and he wouldn't have to have lumped in like, oh, you got to manage the offense and the defense and everybody with the head coach, and you wouldn't have those sort of concerns that you would have with Callahan. So if you were gonna dip from that Bengals well, which I don't think is a bad idea to be honest with you, I'd rather go pitcher than Callahan.
Yeah, and I think you lean towards as well the wide receiver unit, which the Bucs, we've already spoken on it multiple times, but they have a lot of guys there and a lot of talent, a lot of experience, but also too some younger guys that they feel strongly on moving forward with the Emeka Egbuka, Tez Johnson, Jalen McMillan. So when you look at, when I think of the Bengals, and I think about them a lot, I have to think about them at least twice a year. Being a Steelers fan, I immediately think about that wide receiver attack. And, Joe Burrow is a fantastic quarterback, but he also has some absolute animals at the wide receiver room, and they get those guys open.
He does.
That helps you quite a bit. So that would be where, I see that's a solid fit. You feel good about that. Things kind of go in the direction where it also helps Baker Mayfield, you hope, as well, because that's
the Bengals system is still also a Rams sort of thing. For Zach Taylor came from Los Angeles, so that sort of DNA the Bucs have pulled from since hiring Dave Canales would still be there. So that's another benefit of that.
Yeah, and I want someone that is a good coach with the quarterback. And I think that's something that was missing after Canales and Liam Cohen. Those two guys really good developing and growing quarterbacks and making things easier for them. And I think that was something that was heavily missed this last year with Josh Grizzard. I mean, this was his first time calling plays, and that already in its own self is a whole different dimension. That's a whole different world on a week-to-week basis. But then also, too, you also got to work with Baker Mayfield and make things a little bit easier there and make that offense fit where, hey, there's some certain things that works well for him, pros and cons. There's cons for every quarterback. And for Baker, those certain things you've got to be able to adjust with. And I don't think Grizzard was able to do that. I think going into the season, it was easier. But once defenses started to understand what Grizzard was doing and what Baker's pros and cons were, things got really difficult for that offense to click. And so I would like the quarterbacks coach, one that can be really hands-on and excel with Baker. I think that's really important going into this next season to see him excel better. Now when we're talking about Baker Mayfield, we got to go and talk about it right now.
We do, don't we?
We were just talking about it before we went live, but this man doesn't usually tweet a whole ton. Does he have his moments of a chip on the shoulder and a lot of energy, a lot of fire? Absolutely. Since he's come down to Tampa, though, he's kept to, sort of quiet. But when you get those pressers and you can, I do it, but, I try to stab in there a little bit, see if he wants to chirp a little bit. He'll give you some good stuff, but this came out of nowhere. So there was a post, and I want to say, this is from Orlando Ledbetter as a Falcons beat writer, and he put out a post on Twitter saying Falcons. I'll actually bring it up here on the screen for you guys. He said Falcons Kevin Stefanski had a dumpster fire at quarterback in Cleveland. Baker Mayfield and Deshaun Watson failed, which started a chain reaction to 11 other starters. QB Shedeur Sanders closed out last season with 7 starts. So that tweet goes out, and then out of nowhere, like I said, he doesn't tweet a whole ton. Baker Mayfield responds to this, actually quote tweets it and says, "Failed is quite the reach, pal." Pal is
The community
pal.
quote, the community note is on the original tweet is killing me, by the
Yeah,
way.
they just put that just came in there. Here's what he says further. Still waiting on a text and call from him after I got shipped off like a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see you twice a year, coach. So here's Baker, and I wonder where he was whenever he saw this and whoever shared it with him, because I'm sure he goes through and checks some socials now. That's the off season, and checks up on a few things. But I would expect probably someone sent this to him, and he's him and Kevin Stefanski. What we now know, and there was some circulation, some chatter about it during his time at Cleveland. Certainly, whenever he did get sent and traded away to Atlanta, that these guys, at least Baker does not like his former head coach, River.
I think Stefanski is a pretty good offensive mind. Yes, indeed, off of Kevin Stevens guy. I think Stefanski is a very good offensive mind. I think he's going to do well with the Falcons. I really do. I think when people talk about Kevin Stefanski, they forget that he was part of the brain trust that brought Deshaun Watson to Cleveland. He was one of the prevailing voices that did that.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, he did help force Baker Mayfield out of Cleveland. And whether he thought he could get better play out of someone else or what have you, and you had the whole Odell Beckham's dad posting highlight clips thing, if you remember that. That was a whole debacle itself. He did do that. So whether or not you should be replying to a Falcons beat writer on Twitter with this sort of thing, I think he has a point in that, that's what happened in Cleveland. He was cast out. Perhaps regardless of whether or not you think he deserved to be, it was unceremonious for sure. He was traded because he was essentially told there's going to be, we're done with you here. You're going to have to go somewhere else. So he's always had that chip on his shoulder from that moment. And he really plays well when he tries to motivate himself with, the haters and the people talking down on him with that chip on his shoulder. So I think more than anything, this is probably just a way that he can get in that mindset to compete, is to take this slight against him. But it is interesting that he would tweet it out like this. And I can't say I necessarily blame him for having these sort of feelings.
Well, he makes it exciting for us whenever we go into these Atlanta Falcons games. They're already chippy. They don't like one another, absolutely, and they always turn into being pretty damn good games. But now you add a little bit of extra juice. I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever if the NFL wants to schedule this one pretty early on in the season. Why not week 1 again? Why not run that back? Maybe let that be in Tampa. Why not? Let's get the Bucs fan base involved there and get them juiced up a little bit. I mean, let's just go ahead and set it up. Get your popcorn ready. And we've also had, to be honest, we've only been maybe a month. I don't know how long away we've been. A month or so since the Bucs season. Not even a month, but practically getting near it. But we've already had this happen. And then we've also got Cam Jordan going after
Tristan
Wirfs and calling him fat on a podcast. He called him fat.
He did.
Unathletic. And River, you and I, it's one thing that we like to do. We like to get in the gym. We'll never ever imagine the size of these guys. They're monsters, certainly. Next to them and
when you're right up on them,
and locker room after games or after practice, whatever it is. But it's Tristan Wirfs. If I were to put them into a different tier of athleticism, Tristan Wirfs at his size and what he's able to do, and certain things that he was doing coming into the league. The videos of him jumping out of the pool and then him doing some big jumps in the weight room and such, that is such a awful take, in my opinion. Just a bad take. It's just a bad take. And Cam Jordan's Cam Jordan, though. I think he just tries to get under their skin sometimes.
Yeah, well, he likes to mess around. He likes to take shots at the offensive lineman that he's going against. So I don't necessarily blame him there. But
I like the trash
yeah,
talk.
Tristan Wirfs, for anyone who doubts that out there, is extraordinarily athletic, right?
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at the long jump and broad jump, he was better than Cam Jordan in those areas, despite weighing about 35 pounds more than him. So if you just look at the math, that's how that goes. But
You brought up the combine stats on his ass. Damn.
I did. That's how it is. And I
Yeah.
thought it was funny because Cam Jordan's like, all I did was call him fat, and a lot of offensive linemen are fat. And I'm like, well, you implied he's unathletic, and that's true.
Well,
You can
that's
be
what.
fat and athletic; it's possible.
Mhm.
I think all offensive linemen are fat and athletic. To be honest with you, they're incredible athletes, and I think he knows that better than anybody else because he's got to go up against them. So.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the trash talk. I'm all about it. It's
Of
football,
course, of course.
and you get to take care of it, at least from
It's good for
this
ball, baby. It's good for ball.
situation. You can take care of it 2 times a year. So we've already got Saints, Falcons now. We just need a little bit of Panthers. But, I mean, Baker already has his stuff against the Panthers as well. So, like, this NFC South relationship, for Baker at least, is getting a little fiery. I'm enjoying this, and it's still only January. We got a long ways to go before we get the next season. But should be fun with that. Also, too, Joe Thomas, real quick. He just had a crazy reply and a really bad take here. He replied, Joe Thomas played, of course, NFL legend there at offensive line. He says, I could be wrong, but I've heard that communication is a two-way street. And there were no laws against you, Baker, sending Stefanski a text or calling him after you got traded. What?
Well, it's a good thing he acknowledges he could be wrong, because I think he is. Obviously, we don't have the full story.
Here.
We don't have the full story. That there could be things that were going on that we're not privy to between all the parties. But like I said, I think it's fairly decently well known that Stefanski was part of the grouping that wanted to bring Deshaun Watson to Cleveland. And if that is the case, then I don't see why Baker Mayfield would want to talk to Kevin Stefanski anymore, to be honest with you.
And it's the Browns, ladies and gentlemen. It is a awfully ran organization, and
it is. So
very long time.
If Stefanski wanted to call him and say, hey, we're moving in this new direction, we think this is going to help make our team better, wish you the best. That's one thing, but I don't know. I probably wouldn't be shipped off by my head coach and be like, hey man, like, what's up? I don't really know what you say at that point.
I don't think so.
Like I said, we don't know the whole story, so there could be stuff that we don't know about going on there, but from the outside looking in, that seems like a bad take.
I'm sure. I mean, we're going to get, Super Bowl Radio Row, just depending on if we'll have Baker there. We've had him there before, I do believe. Tristan Wirfs usually goes there and travels. We'll see if, Bucky Irvin, I believe he was there too as well. So we'll get some more of this for sure. This will be covered. This was, like I just said, 20 million views and growing. This just happened last night. Over 100,000 likes, almost 150,000 for Baker on his Twitter. Wildness.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll have more. I'm sure we'll have some more reactions as well to discuss, but this makes it a little bit more entertaining as we're heading to this off season. Let's jump over real quick, River, and let's talk about a new hire the Bucs made. Todd Bowles just grabbed Danny Smith from the Pittsburgh Steelers, 72-year-old, a ton of experience. He spent the last 13 seasons with the Steelers, has almost 50 years of coaching experience as well. Todd Bowles said in his statement that he respected him as a teacher and with a lot of deep knowledge at the special teams department. A few stats here that I'd like to bring up, some pros and some cons here. So the Steelers ranked 6th in punt return averaging allowed and 8th in kickoff return allowed. Pittsburgh was 5th in the NFL in opponent drive start after kickoffs. And then going over to some negative things, and this was in our group chat yesterday, but despite some coverage success, though, the Steelers were 21st in punt return average and 28th in kickoff return average in recent seasons. Not much of a strength there for Pittsburgh. Right. Even with the top 10 ranks in coverage, the special teams sometimes struggled positioning on returns, and then sometimes some discipline things. I mean, we saw this last year. Just some out of sorts happening there for the Steelers, but there's pros and cons here. Not everything is
Right.
that's going to be the way for any coach that you bring in, but the Bucs needed to make this move, and you got to think things hopefully will turn in the better direction after moving on from McGahee.
Honestly, to be average is a massive improvement here.
Yeah.
That's kind of how Smith kind of works. When you look at his statistics, a lot of it's pretty middling, like return yards, kick return yards, coverage. So you're taking taking what you get there. I think the big thing that he's done differently that other coordinators haven't done, Logan, you're a Steelers fan, so you've witnessed this. Yeah. His ability to generate block kicks is kind of insane. He had none this year, unfortunately. So that's the downside. But the last 3 years, so 24, 23, and 22, he had 3 blocked kicks each. So 9 blocked kicks in 4 years. That's pretty impressive. So those are game-changing type of plays. And his scheming seems to be able to really attack that part of the games and special teams. And if you're able to generate block kicks, I mean, that could be 7 points flipping the field. That could be an extra 3 points you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Trust us, Bucs fans know that, right? They were on the receiving end of that this year. So I think that's a huge get from him, and that type of ability to be a playmaker on special teams isn't common across the league. So if he can bring that element, it's probably worth the kind of okay to bad coverage statistics that he kind of brings.
Yeah, the Bucs were awful, and kickoff return average, they were 30th.
Yeah, so bad they just
the worst.
Stopped. Actually,
it was atrocious, man. I mean, you just get irritated seeing these guys on kickoff coverage, and it's just like either they're not in the right spots, bad tackling, missed tackling. Just it was bad. It was just really bad, and allowed for your opponent's offenses to put themselves in really good field position. That plays a vital role nowadays, which is how well these offenses are running. But also, too, you mix that in with Todd Bowles' defense, which was not playing well this year, nor the last year as well. Not a great combo there, River. So hopefully maybe you can get one of those to where it could be great if 2 of those can turn a 180 for you and see a positive direction. But it'll be fun to just see him on the sidelines, training camp, and all that kind of stuff, and see how much gum. We got a lot of questions about gum that I'm going to ask him about what his favorite is.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of gum.
He's big on that. He's big on
that. There's going to be a lot of chewing. So the equipment managers and everybody's going to have to load up on that in inventory. So, but yeah, it'll be good. And I think too, just, it's been cool to see the reaction from, the Steelers fan base. They did not want to lose Danny, but also too, please take care of him down here in Tampa. So we'll be interested to hear from him whenever he has his introductory press conference. Now, real quick, and we'll finish it off here, guys. And if you have any questions or topics you would like us to go over before
send them in the chat,
put them down in the chat. We've got a good amount of time still left, so throw them down in the chat. We'll bring up every single one of them. But let's go over to Brian McClendon, which is the Bucs wide receivers coach. He's been with the Bucs, I believe, since 2024, hired then in February, and has a lot of coaching experience, mainly too at the college level. Your favorite team, River, the Georgia Bulldogs, right?
Of course.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Did I get that
right?
You
actually got it completely incorrect.
Yeah. South Carolina, Oregon as well, but he'd been with the Bucs now for 2 seasons, going to go on to 3 potentially. But the Atlanta Falcons, this is hilarious now that Kevin Stefanski is there, and now we're getting all this drama with Baker and him. The Falcons are actually really interested in Brian McClendon as a potential offensive coordinator for them. And when you think about the success the last few years for the Bucs, you immediately do go over to that wide receiver room, and it's been one that has excelled for you. And now your rival is trying to grab one of those coaches that definitely means a lot to what, Baker Mayfield wants to do, but also to Mike Evans. But first off, your thoughts on this and how it could really impact what Mike Evans is going to do in his decision to either stay, maybe go find another team that he feels like can go win a Super Bowl, or call it a career and retire.
Yeah, McClellan's done a lot of really good work, I think. I mean, he's taken guys like Jalen McMillan and Mike Vuka. He's gotten Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in some pretty good shape, and I think he's one of the bigger home run hires that the Bucs have made staff wise, and he's been there for a little bit now, so that makes sense from that angle. Again, if he were an offensive coordinator for the Falcons, he would not be calling plays likely as Kevin Stefanski probably would. Although Stefanski's kind of given that up and taken it back a bunch of different times in
Yeah.
Cleveland, trying in an effort to save his job. So we'll see what would happen there. If he plans to be like a CEO coach or just a regular coordinator coach like we expect him to be. Mike is interesting. I mean, I think the only thing that this would really matter for when it comes to Mike Evans is kind of the sense of continuity. I don't really know if a position coach is going to determine whether or not he comes back or not, but I mean, whether the situation is stable enough for him to want to go back would be a thing he'd think about, I think. And he'd have to really like the new wide receivers coach too, naturally, because he's been used to this one, and he's going to be back for what's probably going to be one more year if he does end up staying. He'd want to be in a comfortable situation. So that'll be something that he evaluates, of course. And that is if McClendon ends up getting interviewed and taking this job. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. I think we've mentioned this before. Seemed like he was going to retire at the beginning of the year. Now leans more towards him coming back, I think, after what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think so too. I think there's some fire still left in him. It was a freak accident that he went through at the Detroit Lions game and suffering that collarbone injury. The hamstring situation is always something he's always going to deal with, which sucks. And he's had to deal with that throughout his entire career. But that one was just a freak one, and that really hurt his potential to reach that 1,000 yards, but also to just overall, I think he just wanted to see the team do better. That's just who he is. But he's a highly competitive guy, and he hasn't really given an straight answer yet. We also haven't heard. We heard from Levante David. He was on Bussing with the Boys, and he talked about his daughter, and that is making an impact. She doesn't want him to play anymore. And that's something that he's doing a lot of thinking right now. And I'm sure that's the same way for Mike Evans. But more specifically for Mike, though, Mike has got to be keeping a very close eye on what they do with the offensive coordinator position. And you don't really necessarily want to move on from your wide receivers coach. Now, if you do bring in a new offensive coordinator, they can bring in who they want, the personnel they see fit for their offense. So there still is always going to be that opportunity or situation. But, for Levante David's side, he mentioned on there too, dude, he was getting his knee drained week after week, dealing with the knee injury, which absolutely sucks. And, for me, though, I think for Levante, it's just age has caught up to him. He's played and had an incredible career. And there's arguments of reaching the Hall of Fame. He went through some really bad years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He told us that. He did. At the Bucs last game of the year, and he told us that I did go through some pretty rough patches. I almost wanted to move on from Tampa, but I was talked into staying, and he was really glad that he did, and eventually was able to reach a Super Bowl. But he's got a lot of stats, and he was an absolute animal for the Bucs. So he has a strong potential. There's going to have to be some people on his side to get him in there, but nonetheless, though, ring of honor for the Bucs, and we'll see what ends up happening between Mike Evans and Levante David. That's something that is, on the back of our head as we cover this team moving forward, is what happens there, because like we've talked about, this wide receiver room is very talented, and they feel strongly about some of those younger pieces, but Mike Evans is Mike Evans. And we saw that whenever he had his game back against the Atlanta Falcons. He will literally change the game for you.
And he did.
and he will. And there's a lot of momentum that he brings in games. So here we go. We got King Cook. Baker got the nerve to be running his mouth, worrying about Atlanta. LOL, such a joke. Just another reason why we won't win with him. Well, you've won 3 straight division titles with him.
You won 2 straight division titles with them, I believe. 23 and 24. And then
that's true,
25.
Yeah, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Baker just needs these sort of things to motivate him, and players do this all the time. You'll see in press conferences, they'll start talking about like they never believed in me, and like when everyone believed in them. So Baker's kind of gotten a lot of public favor recently for how well he's played in 2023 and 2024. And so when everyone's praising him, he like stops having doubters. And now that he was really, really bad for the back half of
Hmm.
the season this year. Maybe he has doubters again, and then we'll continue the cycle. So I think it's just a way for an athlete to get into a headspace and a mindset. And I do think Baker's got quite a few flaws as a quarterback and a passer, but I think they're flaws that you can win with if you have an offensive coordinator that knows how to use him. So I'm not really worried about that sort of thing.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I don't think there's anything else really on here on the docket. We're going to be keeping a very close eye on the Bucs offensive coordinator search here. We're starting to slowly as these pieces unfold, and then you see Mike McDaniel find his spot. I'll be interested to see when Monken eventually goes and reunites with Harbaugh. I don't think that will take too long, but
Yeah.
we will keep a close eye on it. Monken, I think, would be right there. It's 1A, 1B for, it was McDaniel and then Monken right there. I think they were both even to where, Bucs fans would be pretty excited
Yep.
about what the offense would look like moving forward. But we'll keep a close eye on that with the Bucs offensive coordinator search. We'll see if there's any more drama here with Baker and some of these Browns players or former players
There always is.
interacting and responding to it. But I think that's going to do it for us here. If you're still here with us on YouTube, appreciate y'all hanging out with us. If you could, please smack that like button. I think we're close to 10 likes on here this afternoon. We'd appreciate if you could help us get up to 25. That would be awesome. But tons of content coming out there on BucsGameday.com. We'll keep you live and any kind of breaking news. Certainly once the Bucs find their new OC, River and I, and hopefully Caleb on here as well, we'll give you the rundown and our thoughts on it too. But that's going to do it. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's week, and we'll talk to you next time on Hear the Cannons. We're out of here. Peace.